It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome! Hey everybody, welcome in. My name is Chris, and this is a thing that I'm going to endeavor to make by saying words. Thank you for listening. Please continue to wear a mask. Get that vaccine. Let's all get to the point where everything reopens. We can all see each other again and hang out together again. That will be fun. So there are still free agent moves going on. I will briefly talk about the ones that have happened since our last episode dropped last week. And by the way, if you're looking to catch up and get my reaction and some great guests' reaction to all the free agent signings over the past few weeks, just download our two most recent podcasts. We touched on them all. We told you what we thought. So I will get to those extra personnel moves. They're not that big of a deal. So I think the place where we can really start today is something that will affect every single fantasy football league in the world, no matter how you play, in 2021. By which, of course, I mean the dreaded, cynical, annoying 17-game schedule. It is here. Yeah, we knew it would be here. I would say that, I have a pretty big Twitter feed, and the number of people who listen to this podcast is flatteringly large. Thank you, all of you. Hi, I hope you're doing okay. So I hope that we could agree that I have a pretty good sense of the NFL zeitgeist, the football, the gestalt of how NFL fans are feeling, and I think I can mostly say, was anybody asking for this? Did fans really want 17 games? I mean, when it comes around, when we've got an extra week of football, we'll take it. We're fans. We all have our favorite NFL teams, and we have our fantasy teams. And what the heck? It's on. We'll watch. But did anyone among us really look around and say, there just isn't enough of this? A full 5+ months of it, simply not enough. I do not believe that very many people did. It was fine. It worked fine. It was symmetrical. It is, as so much of our American society is, a cash grab by billionaires who simply don't have quite enough, who look at their bank accounts and say, I bet I could be making more. And if that winds up in a lopsided, ungainly 17-game schedule, well, not only can we as owners live with it, but we'll do it for a few years, and then we'll listen to everybody complain about how stupid it is that some teams get 9 home games and some teams get 8 home games, and then we'll go, out of our largesse, because we are the most benevolent of oligarchs, we have decided to come down from the mountaintop and give you another week of regular season football. Behold, the 18-game season. How much do you love us now? Because that definitely is coming soon to a theater near you. It's fine. I'll watch. Whatever. It's one more thing for us to just accept from the ultra-wealthy because they haven't squeezed enough money out of us. It's the lay of the land. And so our fantasy leagues, to bring it back to my main point, they're going to have an extra week of regular season games. If you played 12 games in your league, welcome to 13. If you played 13 games, welcome to 14. It's like, oh boy, it's fine. One more week where you can decide whether to start Mike Davis or David Johnson. You're welcome. We don't actually have the dates of the schedule yet. We don't know, as of my recording this, whether we're talking a regular season that starts 1 week earlier or goes 1 week later. I tend to think it's earlier because they're going to limit the preseason, right? But, and that actually will affect the release schedule of this show. We'll all find out together. And it's pretty cynical, but we're pretty helpless. And I guess we can take the attitude that more football is welcome. I guess that's probably true. It's also more injuries. It's also more stinky games. But, we will deal. But, after this year, what everybody's put up with, we'll deal. All right, so the free agent transactions that have happened since we last talked, they are not big enough to warrant a full segment the way we have done each of the past 2 weeks with Jim McCormick and Brandon Funston. Leonard Fournette, we weren't positive he'd be back with the Buccaneers, but the Bucs have decided to bring back all 22 starters from the Super Bowl team, so playoff Lenny is back. It's a 1-year deal for a 26-year-old running back, which should tell you all you need to know about the esteem that the league holds Fournette in. Not that he doesn't have good moments, but he's a knucklehead, and he had 100 carries last year. Not even 100 carries. Ronald Jones still there. Keyshawn Vaughn did nothing as a rookie, but Bruce Arians already talking him up. Keyshawn Vaughn, I say good luck. This guy signed with the Bills. Ow! Matt Breida, the little one. He goes to Buffalo, where failed flag player Devin Singletary still toils, and Zach Moss is still there too. And if Matt Breida becomes fantasy relevant week by week, something will have gone wrong. A little guy who runs like a big guy. He basically did nothing his 1 year in Miami. Hard to think we're drafting him in regular leagues this year. Speaking of players I don't want to draft, Sammy Watkins goes to the Ravens. Another prove-it 1 year contract, a lot like Fournette's. Hollywood Brown is, to me, very obviously a better player, and frankly, no Lamar Jackson wideout leaps to mind as a great fantasy option week by week, but I guess the Ravens were always going to try to bolster the receiving core, and it could have gone a lot worse for Hollywood. We like Hollywood Brown around here. We like the second half of the season for him. It turning out to be Watkins that they add. I mean, there will be times we'll be mad, and Watkins will have the big play, and Brown will be silent because the Ravens' passing offense just isn't going to be the most dynamic. And, of course, Andrews is there as well, but it could have been worse. They could have signed someone better. What else do I have for you? Mohamed Sanu to the Niners, don't care. Willie Snead to the Raiders, don't care. Certainly care more there about John Brown, but that entire Raider offense just feels like weird duplication of effort. I'm not going to love a lot of guys there. Kalen Ballage to the Steelers. Even the biggest Kalen Ballage fan in the world isn't going to subject us to that again this year. That's it for the free agents. The transactions that were the biggest this week were the trades, right? The first round pick swaps. Those will absolutely affect who gets taken in the NFL draft in about a month. The Dolphins were sitting on number 3 after a good season, right? And I gotta think that if they didn't feel good about Tua, they would stay at number 3. Instead, they traded the number 3 overall pick to the Niners in exchange for number 12 and San Francisco's first rounders in both 2022 and 2023. That is a haul. And then they immediately traded back up. They took the number 6 from the Eagles and gave Philly the number 12 and gave up their own first round pick in 2022 next season. Today's podcast not going to be a draft show. Those are going to start coming next week. We're going to talk about the prospects starting next week, but this does have a huge impact on the draft. Duh, that's an amazing revelatory statement, Harris. Tells us the Niners don't view Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback of the future, maybe not even their quarterback of the present. They are swearing up and down that they aren't going to trade Garoppolo this offseason. However,
coaches lie.
They sure do, Robot Talia. They sure do. Kind of don't care what they say. We could still easily see a trade. You don't give up 2 future first-round picks not to get your quarterback of the future and maybe of the present. It probably also tells us the Eagles in the short term, for at least 1 year, feel pretty good about Jalen Hurts or, giving him a year to show whether he's the guy or not and picking up an extra first-round pick in case he's not, and you can get the guy next year. They will have the ammunition if they have to in 2022 to get up a quarterback. Interesting stuff. Misinformation is flying around. I'm doing my best not to pay attention to that misinformation, but it definitely opens the possibility that the first 4 picks of the draft could wind up being quarterbacks, depending on, the Falcons pick at 4. I think the first 3 seem like they're going to be. And then either the Falcons, not sure what they feel about Matt Ryan or the guy in the future, or else they're in the catbird seat and could trade that pick away if someone loves that 4th QB.
Today's kickoff.
All right, on today's show, we're really going to talk about absolutely none of what I just said. That's, by way of update, usually on the little podcast that could, we tend not to emphasize situation, telling me that the offense on that team is definitely going to be a wagon, or definitely going to stink, and I should value potential fantasy draftees based on those definitelys. That's not really my gig. You know that. That's not the show. And we're not going to tell you to do that today either. But we are going to have kind of an NFL discussion this week. My guest is going to be Brett Kollmann, and we are going to talk football. We are specifically going to talk about skill position football because that's what we really care about here. We are going to nominate a list of NFL offenses we think will be somewhat unrecognizable in 2021 for varying reasons. In a way, we're going to try and, I guess, shake ourselves out of the assumption that we know what situations will be, which is kind of consistent with the overall philosophy I try to expound upon around here. I'll explain it a little better when Brett comes on. It will be a fun and far-reaching conversation, and I thank you so much for being here, for listening today. We're sponsored today by Felix Gray, and one thing I can promise you, I'm always doing the show wearing my Felix Gray glasses. They are my computer glasses of choice. They have really significantly helped my digital eye strain. I switched because I had all the symptoms of eye strain, headaches, and blurred vision. It's all that blue light that our eyes just aren't naturally equipped to handle that we get from our screens. We spend so much time in front of screens and laptops and tablets and phones. 60% of Americans report symptoms of digital eye strain, and Felix Gray glasses, they filter out blue light. Your eyes will feel better. You can get them in prescription. You can also get them in not. They've got a lot of frames. They look great. They won't break the bank. Do you suspect that you might have digital eye strain? Felix Gray glasses, they are patented. They are better than other blue light glasses. I am living proof. I really would love for you to try them. You're going to feel better. Check them out at felixgrayglasses.com/Harris. You always get free shipping and free returns. Always thrilled to have them as a sponsor because my eyes feel better. felixgrayglasses.com/Harris.
Today's guest.
Loves the Texans with his heart and soul. Bill O'Brien's cleft chin will never grow. Oh, he's a film watching man. Yeah, he's Brett Kollmann.
And that is my good friend Jeremy Minor and his homage to Mr. Brett Kollmann. And my guest is Brett Kollmann from the Film Room channel on YouTube. You can find him on Twitter at Brett Kollmann, Kollmann. Please follow him. Do it right now. You're at your computer. Just go Koll, type him in there. Go ahead, do it, and follow him. And then for folks who follow Brett, you already probably know this, but we haven't announced it since he's been on the show back in January. But he has now a podcast that is more regular than it was. I think we used to talk about Brett, the bootleg football podcast rather, but you weren't doing it as regularly, and that is in podcast form. It's also its own channel on YouTube. The Kollmann Empire grows.
The Kollmann Empire. I love that. No, it's been fun. We just passed a year anniversary of doing the show, and right. I think we're kind of more regularly doing it now, once a week or sometimes twice a week, like this week, and it's been fun.
Right. So I didn't mean to say the podcast was new, but we were talking before we started that you hadn't been quite as dedicated to doing it.
Yeah,
completely regularly. Yeah, and that's good. And so on the mothership of the Kollmann Empire is the Film Room YouTube channel, which is a very big channel. Our YouTube channel aspires to that level of greatness. You have a fantasy episode coming out the night we're recording this, this is coming out the night of March 31st. So on the evening of March 31st, West Coast time, you'll have an underrated like dynasty potential rookies for fantasy that you're going to be putting out on the Film Room. Please, people, subscribe. But just give us a taste of the players that you're going to be doing on this particular show.
It'll definitely be more tailored towards dynasty people, especially dynasty IDP, which is like my favorite format because it's massive and it takes a long time to get good at it. Because I play in leagues with like 20 starters, so right. I think between IDP and everything like that. So it's Cam McGrone from Michigan, Nico Collins also from Michigan, a couple offensive linemen I like. In the first series, I did a couple receivers and a running back I really like. Like this rookie class is going to be a staple for fantasy teams, not just in 2021, but for the next 10 years. It's loaded beyond belief.
Yeah, so that description of the superstars, the megastars, the first and second round guys, that's what basically we're going to be devoting April to on this show. And I hope people, as I mentioned off the top, are also looking at our little channel, and we're doing some work there on those guys. Your channel has takes on those guys too, but you're going well deep and beyond. So dynasty players really do check out the Film Room as well. All right, so this is kind of an interstitial show, right? It's between free agency and when it felt like it was close enough to the draft for us to really dive into the prospects, the Devontae Smiths and Trevor Lawrence and all those guys. And so I thought, okay, what's a good topic? And the reason I thought of you is because I feel like you have a great holistic sense of offenses in general. We talk about them just in our regular, like we text about them, like what are they doing offensively? What is their philosophy? We during the season, you and I just have non-televised, non-podcasted conversations along these lines. And free agency has happened and the draft hasn't. But based on the signings, based on the comings and goings, we were talking and we were like, some of these offenses are just going to be unrecognizable. And that's kind of where the topic comes from, that, we thought we would come up with unrecognizable offenses for 2021. You're just going to be surprised, and we might get different usages than you're used to out of some players who you kind of feel like you have pigeonholed. Now, we don't know. It's not even April yet. But we're trying to read the tea leaves. And rather than do our typical countdown list, we thought, well, it would be dumb because we might just kind of come up with the same teams. We kind of each came up with 3, and we'll just have a conversation about what will wind up being 6 different offenses. That's a long preamble. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. Sorry. I apologize for the folks at home for the long preamble. All right, so the topic is unrecognizable offenses for 2021. I have to admit, I don't really have them ranked. It's much more just sort of points for conversation, but why don't you bring one up to start?
So this is one where it's not like it's a huge shift in personnel, but there's 2 guys in particular that will be quote unquote new that I think completely change this offense. And that's the New York Giants getting Kenny Goliday as a free agent and then also getting Saquon Barkley back from injury. I can't remember how many games he played last season, but it wasn't many. It was like 2 or 3, something like that. But I think both of those guys together, assuming Saquon's going to be healthy, which I think he will be, those are both skill position talents that fundamentally change an offense. Saquon both as a runner and a receiver, and then Kenny Goliday is a true number 1 receiver, which this team has lacked since, I don't know, 1 or 2 years that Hakeem Nicks was good. It's been a decade since this team. I guess you can count, the few years that Odell was there before he was unceremoniously shipped off, but it's been a while since they had a true number 1 receiver that was there for a long time. And I think Kenny Goliday is going to be there for a long time. He's absolutely going to help Daniel Jones, who, my God, Daniel Jones needs help. Not just because of the people around him, but just he needs people that can give him a margin for error. And Kenny Goliday is great at doing that with his catch radius, his ball skills, his physicality. Like, Daniel Jones doesn't have to be perfect anymore. He can just kind of throw it up in the general vicinity, and Kenny can go make a play for him. And then obviously you still have Saquon coming back, who, even if something's not blocked well, he can break off a run for you. He's deadly as a receiver in his own right. Like, just those 2 guys alone take so much pressure off of Daniel Jones. And it's the first time since probably 2016, which I think is the last year before Odell started getting hurt and then he got traded. 2016, 2017 was the last time that I felt like the Giants had a good supporting cast for a quarterback, and now I think they have one again.
So I guess I didn't call this top playbooks that will change, because that's not really what I meant, but that's part of what I meant. And so my question about the Giants, and the reason they wouldn't have made my finalist list, is that I still have such suspicions that Daniel Jones isn't good that I wonder whether any of this in the end matters, and maybe we go through a season of being like, well, those 2 guys were pretty good for fantasy, but it kind of was same old Giants. So my question back to you would be, do you imagine the presence of Goliday actually literally changes the Giants playbook?
It's not that it changes the playbook, but I think it makes their current playbook more effective. This is a team that really likes to emphasize a vertical passing game anytime they get a middle field closed look. Like, pretty much anytime they get 1 high safeties, which a lot of teams are going to play 1 high safeties when you got Saquon running the rock. This is a team that really wants to exploit that with go balls down the boundary, with like Yankee concepts where you're trying to really freeze that safety with a post and an over route combo. Like, these outside receivers between Goliday and Slayton are going to absolutely be key in terms of making it very difficult to effectively play 1 high defenses against them. Like, even if you have good corners, these are 2 receivers, in my opinion, that can just go up and make a play, even if it's ugly. And the more that happens, the more you force defenses to then play too high to help out these corners, the more it helps Saquon. And the more Saquon gets to run, the less Daniel Jones has to throw in the first place, which I think is a good thing for everybody.
Sure. I mean, so that's, I guess, let's not argue about how many angels are dancing on the head of a pin. I will argue maybe it's the same playbook, just run better because Goliday is better and therefore maybe not completely unrecognizable, but maybe your point would just be, in terms of performance, dude, it's pretty unrecognizable. And I get that. It's funny, though, there are a lot of Goliday doubters. There are a lot of, I don't think a lot of Giant fans are. I think everybody kind of wants to believe who roots for the team. But there are people like, well, if you wanted someone to separate, Galladay's not the guy, right? And I think you know about me that I am not the person to say that. Like, there are certain players who don't need 3 yards of space between him and a defensive back to be open, and Goliday is the prototype for that. So super excited to see how it turns out. But by the same token, we could probably agree that there's about 20 landing spots that would have been better just because the quarterbacks are better.
Yeah, I'm still not entirely sure why he chose New York over some of the other destinations. Maybe they just wanted to give him an extra year. I don't know, but
All right, so I'm gonna for my first nomination on this list, but I'm interested to see what you think. I'm going on Golladay's former team in terms of unrecognizability. I just don't think you're gonna see. I don't think it's necessarily going to be good, but I think it's going to be radically different. Because at this point, so there's no Matthew Stafford. It's going to be Jared Goff. There's no Marvin Jones and no Kenny Goliday. There's, tons of just personnel change. There's just going to be a bunch of different guys there. You're going to have, I guess this is where Jamal Williams landed, and so he's going to be infringing upon DeAndre Swift, and he's a really good player. You've got like Brashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams for receivers, blah. I mean, Dan Campbell. You kind of have the meathead contingent. Anthony Lynn is the offensive coordinator. We can certainly talk about the fact that the personnel looks like a pretty big downgrade talent-wise, but the way that they're going to approach it, to me, seems like the league knows what Goff is, and a team that signs him or trades for him, even though part of what they're trying to do is rebuild, also knows what he is, and what he's not is probably what the Rams are trying to make him be. So rather than Stafford, gunslingy, open the field for the running backs, stretch. I just think it's going to be real horizontal, real West Coast, potentially efficient, but potentially not all that exciting.
In my opinion, a lot of the 2021 Lions offense rests on, are they getting Kyle Pitts with the 7th overall pick, which is a legitimate possibility. He only has to get by, Atlanta and Miami before they can pull the trigger. In Atlanta, Miami, you might take Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell above him. If they get Kyle Pitts, it doesn't really matter that their top receivers are Tyrell Williams and Brashad Perriman, because they're going to be in 12 and 22 personnel all day anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
That, I think, is what they're going to want, because TJ Hawkins is a really good blocking tight end, and I think he's just a good receiver as well. Kyle Pitts is a generational receiving talent at tight end that can also basically just play X receiver for you. You can pretty much stay in that personnel grouping all day long, limit your exposure to how thin you are at wide receiver, just run the ball over and over and over again with DeAndre Swift, hit the tight ends with play action. Tyrell Williams still has speed, and Brashad Perriman still has speed, not as much as when he was coming out of college, but he still does. Like, that's an offense that I think you can work with Goff. And is it a long-term solution for the next 10 years? Hell no. Can it work for 2021? Yeah, sure.
So for me, the key question, because we're always looking for running backs, right? And I really like DeAndre Swift. I think you really like DeAndre Swift as a talent.
Oh, yeah. He was one of my top 4 running backs coming out last year,
good
which
player.
All those top 4 guys were like all smashed together in terms of rankings. So
right, really good player. I'll be interested to see where, because, we all decide that we know what these teams are. And to some degree, by picking this topic, I'm kind of doing it here, just like telling you, because it's Jared Goff and because it's Anthony Lynn, it's this kind of offense, right? And that I don't want to, what I'm interested to see if maybe the drumbeat goes away from DeAndre Swift because people go, oh, it's going to be 2 tight end formations the whole time. The entire defense is not going to have to worry about downfield stuff because whoever really worries about Brashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams, Mr. Robot, Kaiser Soze, Mr. Robot. I mean, those are 2 all nickname teams, by the way. For two of the best nicknames in the history of this show, Kaiser Soze and Mr. Robot. And there's I think there's a chance DeAndre Swift really falls because people go, Lions are 2-15 with that extra game. They're 2-15, and therefore, like, I just don't want anybody on this team. I might still want Swift.
I mean, it depends. Obviously, it's always what round is he going in, but I think you're correct in that he's going to get drafted as like a late RB2, early RB3, because I think people are just so down on the Lions in general. I could just see him kind of slipping through the cracks, especially when you got all these running backs coming out this year. There's always rookies that then push guys. You know, it's shiny new object syndrome. I could absolutely see him being valued that way. The question is, are you and I, who both love him as a talent, going to fall into the same trap that we did with Devin Singletary, where we know he's so much better of a player than his production, and we're going to sit there for years and say, I promise this guy's a good player, but then he gets 5 carries. That's the one thing I worry about, is are we going to fall victim to that as well? Because they still have Jamal Williams. They still have Kerryon Johnson. I highly doubt DeAndre Swift's ever going to be a 20 carry a game type of guy. I think they're going to rotate a lot of people, which regardless of how good we think Swift is as a player, if he's only getting 15 touches a game, that does.
15's a dream, man. 15 would be fine.
15's a dream, yeah. But if he's getting 10 or 12, it's like, oh man, like, can we bank on him getting maybe 80 yards a game, hopefully, on the top end? Like, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Hey, a quick break to mention one of our sponsors. If you have credit card debt, I hope you will look at Upstart. Been sponsoring the show for years now because they have helped a bunch of listeners figure out a way to get out of credit card debt. Upstart knows you're more than just your credit score. They offer smarter interest rates to help you pay off your debts. When I took on Upstart as a sponsor, I did research because you want to be offering stuff that helps people, and Upstart really does use a different model. They go beyond the traditional FICO score when assessing your credit worthiness. They get 4.8 rating out of 5 on Credit Karma. They get 4.5 stars out of 5 on Best Company. They're ranked number 1 on Trustpilot with 96% approval, and a 5-minute online rate check could really help consolidate your debt and make it manageable. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/Harris. That's upstart.com/Harris. Don't forget to use our URL. Let them know we sent you. Only takes a few minutes. Checking will not affect your credit. That's upstart.com/Harris. Okay, we're back with Brett Kollmann, and we are talking about unrecognizable offenses for 2021, and we're using the term unrecognizable as loosely as physically possible because we're not really trying to prejudge situation. We're almost kind of looking at playbooks and wondering our established perceptions of what teams are ready to be kind of have the apple cart shaken up. And so, Brett, I'm going to ask you for another one.
So my second team, staying in the NFC East, was the Washington football team, which looks very, very different in, I think, the most entertaining possible ways. Number one, you get Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Can I interrupt and just say, if I'd just been doing top 3 and hadn't had you on the show, they would have been in my 3. So they're not going to be on my list here, but they would have been. So yeah, I agree. This is my way of saying I agree.
And for good reason. Yeah. For good reason, because it's not like, yeah, it's the same, system and everything like that, but you get a quarterback who just fundamentally plays the position differently than Alex Smith.
Like an insane person?
But we love him for that. He's like one of the most entertaining quarterbacks of this entire generation. Terry McLaurin's going to benefit like crazy from that. Antonio Gandy-Golden, because we know that Fitzpatrick loves big outside receivers, is absolutely going to benefit from that. I could see him kind of being like Fitzpatrick's go-to guy from like the high red zone, the 20-25 area, where he's just throwing fades all day to him. Curtis Samuel, obviously, as their number 2, definitely their number 2 receiver, but also just all the gadget stuff they're going to be able to do with him. And the tight ends, like Logan Thomas, I think is going to be a legitimate red zone threat. Like Ryan Fitzpatrick is very good at working with big bodies, especially down the red zone. Both Gandy-Golden and Thomas, I think, are potentially going to be, steals in standard leagues where touchdowns are at a premium. And then obviously I still love the offensive line absent left tackle, but lucky for them, this is one of the best tackle classes ever. So they're going to be able to get a left tackle at 19 in the draft anyway. Like, not to mention the running backs too, Antonio Gibson, who, by the way, when I was on this show last summer, who was the guy that I was pounding the table for?
Super early, man. I mean, this was like okay, no one's ever going to take this guy, but that we do that topic, right? We do the super, super, super deep sleeper, and you were on him.
Because that was before Geiss's thing even happened. And I was like, look, I know he's not going to get snaps in the first month of the season, but please just stash him. And then all of a sudden the depth chart cleared out and he's like the week 1 starter and ends up having a good year. So that was a little bit of luck on my part. But overall, the skill position talent, the quarterback upgrade, the offensive line presumably getting upgraded with this class, like this offense is going to be legitimately fun to watch. And I'm probably going to own a pretty big chunk of it in most of my leagues.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an upgrade. I really don't, because Ryan Fitzpatrick is the definition of a double-edged sword. I mean, he's going to help you and then he's going to kill you, right? But it's going to be different. If the topic is different, you can't get more different than Alex Smith to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, that's the ultimate conservative American ninja warrior, just the dude who just does not want to make a mistake. He's had it drilled in his head his whole career. And then the dude who has no conscience, no shame, no fashion sense, or one would say amazing fashion sense. Now, he wasn't promised the job, right? And we'll see. Is everything about Mac Jones totally smokescreened and Jones is there in the mid-late first round for Washington and they go, what the hell, we'll take him? Like, we don't know for sure. That's why we're talking now. We don't really know, but you're allowed to call Antonio Gandy-Golden an amazing call by you if he's even on the field when we get to the fall, because he wasn't last year. Obviously didn't play. It's a motley crew. It is a weird group of players. Like Terry McLaurin feels like he's pretty well, just a good, at this point, we had questions about him coming out of college. Like, I think, do you agree with that? Like McLaurin is kind of just, he's pretty much could play in any system. He's a good receiver, fast guy.
Yeah. He's just one of those guys where you just throw him on the field and he'll be fine. Everybody
else, it's a weird, like Curtis Samuel's is an acquired taste. If you need him to do wide receiver things, I know what happens. If you ask him to run some wide receiver things, but some gadgets, and let's play it running back a little bit, like it can be an interesting complementary thing. Antonio Gibson, he's was more of a running back than I thought, but obviously he has lots of hybrid in him. And then Fitzpatrick himself is just weird, like as a player, just super, super up and down. It might be the same playbook. As you started to say, it might be the same playbook, but they're not going to call the same plays in it. That's all I can tell you.
One note about Gandy-Golden, by the way, just dynasty players stash this away. I remember he was at the Senior Bowl when I was there last January. Seems like an age ago now. And I talked to him a little bit after practice, a couple of days. Like, this is a guy who's 6'4", 6'5", runs in the mid to high 4.4s, just huge catch radius. And even though he was a little bit rawer at Liberty, this is a guy who learns really quickly. And even between the end of his last season at Liberty and then going to the Senior Bowl, his route running acumen had drastically improved. This guy is like a legitimate genius level intelligence. Like, he had to order bigger Rubik's cubes that had more cubes to challenge himself. Like, this is a guy who just for fun decided to take up bowling and within a month and a half bowled a perfect game. Like, he's really, really like freakishly smart and just one of those guys that if he puts his mind to getting better at something, he will. And just from what I've heard from people at organization, they're very high on him. Okay. And you're going to be able to, like, nobody talks about him because again, he's a 4th round pick from freaking Liberty.
Who did nothing.
Nobody talks about him.
People were talked about him last year, but he didn't do anything. So,
and
it's
I think
often
that's
a red flag.
It's partly because of who was there, and I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is a better quarterback for his skill set.
Okay,
he's somebody that I'm going to be stashing, and he's going to be dirt cheap, so I have no expectations. But the potential payoff is really big.
Okay, my question to that would be: did he not put his mind to being better last year? Because he should have. I'm just teasing you.
It was a tough situation.
I'm teasing you. I'm going to tease you one more time too, because I know people are hearing it. When you say this is a guy who, that's like a verbal tick that we all learned from sportscasters. Oh, this is a guy who, and I call it out on the show all the time. So when you say it, you can say it, and there's no it's fine. But I know people are laughing at you, and then laughing at me and laughing at the show and whatever. So I'm just pointing. I'm just I don't mean to be a jerk.
Unleash my inner Collinsworth. That's what I'm doing.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying right there. Okay, so I'm going to say the footy pajamas. In lieu of Washington on my list, I'll say the New England Patriots. Well, first of all, we don't really know for sure what they're doing at quarterback because it's not like they gave Cam Newton real money. But they gave a lot of other people real money, which makes you suspect there's really no way out. I mean, you know me, Brett. I always say the cap is crap, and you can do pretty much anything you want. And if you decide you don't want to, that's fine. But you can spend pretty much anything you want if you renegotiate a bunch of other contracts. But I'll say it would be a challenge given the contracts the Patriots just handed out to all these other players and then gave the quarterbacks nothing. It would be a challenge to get anybody other than a rookie. We'll see. People have talked about Mac Jones to the Patriots. Like we'll see. If it's Cam Newton, okay, that it's obviously still the same coaching staff. It's obviously still the same playbook. And if it's Cam Newton, it's obviously still the same quarterback with some ungodly, unbelievable limitations that they're going to be writing about in NFL textbooks, which there will be 100 years from now when the NFL and the government have merged. But like. And even the person like the running backs, like, same group, same hodgepodge, like same guys, not loving any of them. Let's maybe Damien Harris, maybe we'll see. I get it. I don't know. Just the receiving core. I'll ask you because I think I don't like Nelson Aguilar at all, but the fact that you're bringing in Nelson Aguilar, the fact that you're bringing in these two tight, let's face it, what I'm really talking about here is the two tight ends. Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry have to be on the field basically all the time. I can't imagine by the end of the year, I think you're going to have more snaps the Patriots played with both of them on the field than not. And if that's the case, that's a very different offense because they didn't have anybody they could rely at on tight end. And it changes even though you have the same limited quarterback and you have the same group of running backs, to me, it really changes the way you approach play calling.
Keep in mind, back in Josh McDaniels' 2011 season, which I think was his first year back after his stint in Denver, that was the year where they had prime Gronk and Hernandez, and that was like the only year they got of the Boston TE party. They were the best offense in the league that year, one of the best offenses of the last 30 years, to be honest, when you look at all the metrics. And they spent a majority of their snaps in 12 personnel. And I can't remember who their number one receiver was that year. It might have been Deion Branch, if I remember correctly. Like, again, the receiving core was nothing to sneeze at or nothing special, just like it's not this year either, where your best receiver is still probably Jacoby Myers, like if we're being real. Like if I'm
you don't think it's Nelson Aguilar, huh?
I mean, Aguilar, here's the thing, like Myers doesn't have like the juice that Aguilar does down the field, but like Aguilar just makes one play a game that pisses me off, and the inconsistency is like so annoying.
I think the dude you're forgetting, I had, as the footy pajama wearer, there was a guy named Wes Welker on that team. He was pretty good.
Yeah, he was a little bit good, but that's an offense that they made.
I think he caught 120 balls that year.
I think Amendola was there too, but I'm talking the number one receiver outside. But like an offense made up of tight ends and slot receivers was like the weirdest thing ever at the time. But they killed everybody,
right?
And I kind of get the sense they want to go somewhat back to that with the tight ends, and then they don't have a Wes Welker on the team right now. But again, I like Jacoby Myers. Kendrick Bourne is fine. Nelson Aguilar gives you some deep speed, but again, there's going to be that one or two plays a week that just makes you tear your hair out. And then Nikhil Harry, I'm still not even convinced he's going to be on the team.
Yeah, me neither.
So, but again, you're absolutely right. It's going to be tight ends all day, every day. We're running the ball like crazy. I wish that they had a better number one running back than Sony Michel, who's
they might.
Again,
might be Damien Harris.
I mean, I like Damien Harris better, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that they're going to give him the carries that I think he should get, but like that's going to be the offense. We are tight ends on the field, ground and pound, protecting Cam because they still have a really good offensive line, and you play good defense. It's not going to be a flashy, sexy offense like the last time that they had, the two tight ends, because they had literally the two best tight ends in the league at the time. They don't have that now. So it's going to be like a similar system, but like much different production. And they'll be fine, but they're not going to be like historically good like last time.
Yeah, the reason I'm not nominated for this list is that I do think it's going to look different even from last year. I think it's going to be honest, I think it's going to look even more like a college offense. I think you're going back to college with these guys. Like, you could argue watching the Patriots was kind of like lots of misdirection, lots of, they've kind of brought in a lot of the jet sweep stuff, right? And the fake jet sweep and whatever, they've done a lot. I think it's going to be even more of that, and tons of tight end screens. You're going to get 160 catches between those two dudes. And I don't even like Jonnu Smith, but he's got some money and he's going to be out there and he's going to get the ball. Like, as long as he's healthy.
You don't like Jonnu Smith?
Not particularly, no. You?
I like Jonnu Smith. I liked him a lot at Tennessee, to be honest.
Yeah, well,
he was like one of my did a sleeper episode last year, and he was like my tight end sleeper. I always have a tight end sleeper every single year. And he was mine this year. I was like, he's not going to be like, a top 4 tight end. I can't remember what he ended up scoring, but I was like, he's going to at least be a number 1 starting tight end every single week for you. And you're going to get him in like round 13, which ended up being true. I love Jonnu Smith. I think he's very solid. Hunter Henry's better, but Jonnu Smith is like an H-back, a move tight end, like that kind of guy. Like, I think you could do a lot worse than him.
I mean, he had 41 catches for 448 yards. He had 8 touchdowns, but
he was dealing with some injuries and stuff like that.
So he played 14 games. Yeah, I don't like Jonnu Smith that much, but I just think you're going to see Harry High School. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with the notion that if Cam Newton is your quarterback and you're in 12 personnel constantly, or bringing in extra offensive linemen to get mismatches, one receiver streaking down the field, running wind sprints and not getting the ball, that it starts to look like a high school offense?
It's tough to say, because with that system, like even going back to the last time McDaniels ran this personnel package, like the Earhart-Perkins offense, or at least their version of it, the plays don't change with the personnel. It's like you can run any play with any personnel grouping. Every single position has to know every single position, because they'll just call a formation regardless of who's out there on the field, and you have to get into it. So it's like, if you're a wide tight end and you know that there's a certain formation call where you basically have to play X receiver, you better go do that. That's why Gronk spent so much time, as a boundary receiver, basically when he was there. And, Hernandez basically was a big slot for them a lot of the time. Like the play calls and the formations are not affected by personnel groupings as they would be in like a traditional West Coast system, like all the Shanahan type stuff. So I don't necessarily think that they're going to be doing different crazy stuff.
No,
I just think
just
they're going
boring
to
high school crap is my point.
It's going to be emphasizing different principles. It's going to be more wing. It's going to be more like offset eye with Jonnu Smith basically as the fullback. You're going to get like 2x2 stuff with.
In other words, high school stuff.
No, because high school stuff is different. High school stuff is air raid now. Like, again, this is,
I'm talking about my high school days.
Like high school stuff right now is Cliff Kingsbury. That's
right,
why
exactly.
I disagree with you.
Okay,
like,
I'm talking. When I think of the high schools like single wing, I'm thinking I'm old.
No,
not that
like
old, not single wing
Navy.
old, but sure. I mean, yeah. Do you think there's a Navy connection with Bill Belichick? Like, to some degree, that's what I'm talking about. I think it's almost the Navy offense. You know what I mean?
They're going back to 1985. Which, to be honest, there's a lot of defenses that are not built to handle that, because they're built to handle the current high school spread, air raid, all that kind of like. There's a lot of modern defenses. Like Darius Leonard plays at 215. He's a Mike linebacker. Are you kidding me?
They're getting bigger while everybody else is getting smaller.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Defenses are getting smaller. Yeah, it is a strategical reason to do that. That's a good point.
Yeah, for sure, of course.
One more quick break to thank Roman for sponsoring us on the podcast today. If you've struggled with ED, you're not alone. You can feel like you're alone for sure, but ED is a medical condition like any other. It's not something you can just wish away. We treat medical conditions, so if it's been bothering you, you have options. With Roman, you can get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED, all from the comfort and privacy of your home. A licensed healthcare professional will work with you to find your best treatment plan. If they deem that medication is appropriate, you'll get it shipped with free 2-day shipping. No in-person trips to the doctor, no face-to-face conversations at the pharmacy. Getting started simple. Complete that online visit by going to getroman.com/Harris. It's a medical condition. and you can get it treated from home. Complete an online visit today and connect with a doctor and take care of it. Plus, when you do go to GetRoman.com/Harris, you'll get $15 off your first month. It's a straightforward way to get rid of ED. GetRoman.com/Harris. Get started now to save $15 on your first month of treatment. Okay, we're back with Brett, and we are going to talk about a couple of more unrecognizable offenses for 2021. Brett, who was next on your list?
So my last team, speaking of, old West Coast systems in the Shanahan mold, although it's been modernized under Sean McVay with some bells and whistles that I've always found fascinating. The Rams, I think, again, they're going to be running the same stuff they did last year, but the fact that you have Matthew Stafford running it instead of Jared Goff changes everything. Like the types of throws that you can reliably bank on as a play caller change dramatically because he's so much more talented than Jared Goff. And keep in mind, like I have a copy of McVay's playbook and I've studied it and done multiple episodes on it, so I'm fairly familiar with his system. A lot of the stuff that he does is the same stuff that Mike Shanahan was doing, 30 years ago. But how he integrates motion and just really kind of clever misdirection onto literally the same play calls that have been working since Elway was running this in the 80s. The modernization of it I find fascinating. And when you drop Matthew Stafford in here, like I'll give you an example. Like a flood concept, like a 3-level flood concept with like a receiver in the flat, a clear out, and then like a deep 7 to the boundary, like 30 yards down the field. One of McVay's favorite calls. Matthew Stafford throws a deep 7 better than all but like 4 other quarterbacks in the league. Like his ability to drop the ball in the bucket 30 yards down the field on the boundary, far superior to Jared Goff. Jared Goff, I think, is a good deep ball thrower if you're just running a go route or if you're hitting like a deep post. But in terms of like being able to put the ball high and a yard outside the sideline on a deep 7, it's a very specific type of deep ball that I feel like Matt Stafford is way better at. And this is a concept that Sean McVay loves to call because it's good against almost every single coverage out there. And now he's going to be able to call it more than ever. So you're going to see Robert Woods catching that. You're going to see Van Jefferson catching that. They added Deshaun Jackson, who I think is going to be more than just a decoy. Like this offense, I think, is going to be so much better vertically and so much more efficient. Like it's going to be the same system, just an extra 10 or 15% production on top of it, which I think is enough to make this not just a much better offense, but a much different offense in terms of feel. Like when you're watching the game live, it's going to feel different.
Well, it's what you said. Like literally, if a coach isn't leaving, the plays are still going to be called the same thing, and he still has the same arsenal of things that he calls. Like, so that's really not what we're talking about here. It's exactly what you said before, which is, okay, I have this different guy, these different people who can do this thing, so I'm going to emphasize a different part of my playbook, things that Jared Goff wasn't as comfortable with. So that's why the Rams are a good nomination for this list, because Stafford and Goff are just very, very different players. But I will ask you this question. I think probably some league observers have the question about, Goff has his limitations, and you just talked about one of them. He is when he's good, he's been a very precise West Coast timing, kind of indefensible sort of thrower in a way that, Matt Stafford's never been. Stafford's much more an improv guy, jump around, kind of has to see it to throw it, doesn't always do the best with anticipation on shorter throws. Like you said, the longer stuff, he's willing to let the receiver go get it and trust his arm. So I wonder whether you think West Coast concepts in general will maybe take a little bit of a dive with the Rams.
I don't necessarily think so, because I think Stafford, he can do the easy stuff too. I think sometimes he might hang on number 1 in the progression a little bit too long, because by God, he wants to throw it down the field. Because, he remembers back in the day when he had Calvin, it's like, I'm going to run around, and I know Calvin's going to be there 40 yards down the field. Let's go make it happen. There's still some of that left in his game. Yeah, he's got the arm. There's still some of that left in his game where sometimes it's like, God, Matt, can you just do the easy thing?
Hero ball.
And I think Sean McVay is going to help him do the easy thing more. But the advantage and the reason why Sean wanted him so much is when a defense changes its picture on you post snap, Jared would freeze. Yeah. And it was ugly. Whereas Stafford, I think, if he gets a surprised by the defense, or there's a free rusher that lets through, like he's a guy that can rescue a bad play or rescue a bad play call. Whereas Jared was very much like, it's McVay. He's going to put in what he thinks going to work, and by God, I hope it does, because if the defense changes the picture on him, he's not going to be able to get you out of a bad call. Right. So that's really why the Rams wanted Stafford, is he gives McVay more margin for error as a play caller.
Sure, he's just better.
Better.
I think there's something to the notion, though, that if you're gonna make, like, what's a good West Coast quarterback? It's just someone who's, you said it, when Goff is good, like super decisive, makes the one read and knows where to go. Like you've said, defenses have gotten smaller and smaller, so and have, they're trying to get to the quarterback so bad with as much pressure as they can. I have doubts, honestly. If you'd say, of course, all offenses run components of the West Coast, including the Lions in the Stafford years, of course. But if you're really asking Stafford to be that robotic, like, man, just move the chains, that's what we're doing, there's hero ball in him. He's got some knucklehead in him, I think.
Here's how I look at it, though, okay, with quarterbacks that have tended to have hero ball in them before. This is a system, not just with McVay, but with the Shanahan, really the whole Shanahan tree, that in the past has made mediocre quarterbacks good, it's made good quarterbacks great, and it's made great quarterbacks MVPs with Aaron Rodgers, Steve Young, you go down the line. Yeah. So the question is, do you think Matt Stafford is a great quarterback that's going to be an MVP caliber quarterback, or do you think he's a good one that's just going to be great? That is something I'm not quite sure yet, because I haven't seen him in this system before, but I'm very excited to find out.
Right. So it's fair. It's fair to say that if you're a quarterback who plays for Sean McVay with these weapons, which are still very, very good, although no Malcolm Brown, watch out, that could be a problem. Just kidding. This is why maybe I'm agreeing with you that he's going to perform better as a fantasy quarterback. And I'm agreeing more than I thought I would with the Rams' inclusion on this list, because the more I think about it, the more I think if you're going to play to Stafford's strengths, you're going to call the 7 route more as a primary read in a way that you don't with Jared Goff, except when you need it on 3rd and long. You're going to, which that's not really a West Coast. Of course it is a West Coast route, but it's, it's a little more arm talent thing rather than schematic. And this is not me disagreeing with anything that you've said, but almost kind of talking my way through how McVay is actually going to emphasize different parts of the playbook with Stafford.
Yeah, I mean, they would call flood a lot, but it was a lot of like, we're hitting the flat on flood. McVay, It's like, no, give me the 20-yard chunk on flood. Right. That's what I want. Yeah. And if they sit on the corner, guess what? You got Deshaun running down the field. Just let it rip. Because that's more of an alert where it's like maybe you come back to it 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds into the play. Jared wasn't mobile enough and he didn't have the arm talent to suddenly go back to Deshaun Jackson 3 seconds into the play, whereas Stafford can. So there's going to be more explosive plays on the same concepts, and that's why they're going to be better.
Does he have Deshaun Jackson going down the field, though? Does he? For how many games do you think Deshaun Jackson's going to be doing? I'll give you 4.
Oh, man. The over-under, I was going to say the over-under's got to be less than 6, right?
Yeah.
At this point.
We'll see. It sounds good, but we'll see. All right, so the last team I'm going to bring up for this list of unrecognizable offenses, it's a cheat, but I don't care. There's no Drew Brees in New Orleans, man. It's going to be, they're going to have to do something different. I don't care whether it's, Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill are not the same, and it would be really, really, really unrecognizable if it's Taysom Hill, because it is the single wing. It is at that point what I think of as a high school offense, and woe betide the people who draft Michael Thomas in the 2nd round or whatever at that point. To start, I think we're going to be talking about Jameis. I don't really know. Who knows, right? You've got Michael Thomas, you've got Alvin Kamara. They're the big ticket items. No more Emmanuel Sanders, who never really settled in great, and no more Jared Cook, who's with the Chargers. It just, it can't be a quarterback based offense anymore. If you're gonna, like, I'll even ask this as a question. it's easy to say half or more than half of the offenses in the league are a West Coast offense, and of course that's what the Saints are running too. But the Saints have had a Breeze-esque twist on it. How would you describe their twist on it?
I like to call it this. I like to call it the spread coast, because there was a lot of West Coast stuff with Sean Payton, and then a lot of spread stuff in there too, in terms of like C space, attack space,
right?
Like, because that's what the spread is. It's like we are literally just attacking space, and they did that so much, especially with running backs over the years with Reggie Bush and Sproles and Kamara and everything like that. Like, the running backs in this offense are the space finders, but Breeze always gave them the ball when they found space.
He sees it. Yeah.
He sees it. And my not to go off on a rant here, I don't know if I'm even going to draft a single Saints skill position player, as much as I love them as talents, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara especially, because I don't know who's starting, and I get a sneaking suspicion the Saints aren't going to tell us until like the day before week 1, after everybody's drafted. And if it's Jameis, fine. I'll be cool with Thomas. I'll be cool with Kamara. But if I'm not absolutely sure that Taysom Hill is not starting week 1, I don't know if I'm going to draft any Saints skill position players, because I don't trust it. I flat out don't trust it.
Yeah, it would be it would be the most different offense. Going from Drew Brees to Taysom Hill would be the most different offense you probably ever could have in the modern NFL. Even if it's Jameis, trusting Jameis to see open space with those Sean Payton concepts consistently and not make, he's functional. He'll know when Alvin Kamara's by himself in the flat. That's fine sometimes, but he'll also, he'll just do Jameis things. He'll just do dumb stuff. And does that affect the other guys on the team that you might want to draft from a fantasy perspective? Maybe not one-to-one directly, but to me, it always comes down to, hey man, these guys are really popping with Jared Goff. I'm good. I'm all right. Goff's good enough. I don't need to own Goff. I got all these other guys. And then something happens in week 13 when you really need a win, and Goff just doesn't have it and messes up, and all the guys you were relying on just all puke at the same time, because it was never really that great of a system. It just sort of was, Goff was stumbling by. And I mean, I think Goff is better than Winston, right? They're different, but I think Winston stinks. And I'm with you. There's not a quarterback there who I really super trust. Of course, that might be built into what the prices of those players wind up being. In Kamara's case, I'm going to guess not, though, because he's awfully good. It just doesn't feel like it's going to be fully recognized. You're going to still try to run a bunch of weapons all over the field. There's going to be tons of speed. There's going to be Michael Thomas, the big guy. There's going to be like Jameis, just like, if it's Jameis, like, hold it down, man. Like you said, run to space, throw to space, and there are going to be times where he just completely loses his mind.
Let me ask you a question, because they have right now literally just a hair under $1 million of cap space. There's still some stuff they can do to clear it. Let me ask you this question. If they make a play for Sam Darnold, does your opinion on this offense change?
It just works better. Like, Darnold isn't erratic like Jameis. Jameis has more ceiling on a play-by-play basis, it seems like. But I don't know about you. I trust Darnold to, like, see the dude who this play is designed for breaking open 7-yard curl, that Breeze always sees and is always going to throw, that Jameis is just going to be like, blah, and start running around.
I think Darnold going from Adam Gase to Sean Payton is going to be such a different player. And I actually, again, if it wasn't like prohibitively expensive, because again, They only have $1 million to work with, and they still have to sign draft picks, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's still stuff they can do with void years, like that Taysom Hill contract, which is absolute insanity, but whatever, it works for them. Like, if they get Darnold, I'm actually fairly optimistic about this team, because I think I think Darnold is not beyond repair. He just has to get away from Adam Gase, which he is now, and going from Gase to Sean Payton, I think he'd just be a totally different player. Like, I'm still a believer in him, not to the point where I'm passing up a quarterback at second overall, but I'm still a believer in Sam Darnold to the point where it's like, if they got a king's ransom of picks to move down, and they were like, we're going to run it back with Sam Darnold one more year, we've got a better offensive coordinator, we got all these skill position players that we drafted with all these extra picks, like, I wouldn't hate it. Like, I like Darnold. I'm not afraid to admit that. But if the Saints got him, again, same thing, I'd be more inclined to draft their skill position players just for the fact that it's not Taysom Hill starting.
Yeah. Well, and then for my point, also not Jameis. It can work, and then eventually it won't, and you'll be pissed. That's all I can say. Like that's the story of Jameis.
Well, if you're drafting any of these Saints skill position players to come through for you at week 16 in the championship, good luck.
Yeah, that's
good luck.
All right, so we wound up with, and these are in the show notes, but we wound up with Giants, Lions, Washington Patriots, and Rams Saints as in different ways, as we discussed, as kind of quote-unquote unrecognizable offenses where there's at least questions to be asked and answered with personnel, and then some uncertainty when it comes to drafting these guys. And I thought it was pretty fun to talk about it. You can follow Brett on Twitter, like I've said, at Brett Kollmann, Kollmann. And I would love it if you would subscribe to 2 different YouTube channels that Brett runs. If you could do it right now, you'd be doing me a favor. Go to the Film Room, big channel. And also now the Bootleg Football Podcast is it's a podcast, but he's doing it where you can see his pretty face as he's talking about it. Also on YouTube, or you can subscribe and find the Bootleg Football Podcast wherever you find podcasts. All right, Brett, we made it through. Next week, it's going to be, April is the month of draft, so it gets a little more drafty. But this was a pretty fun topic.
Yeah, and what's fun is you're going to have to redo it again in about a month because every single offense is going to be wildly different again.
Bite your tongue, Brett Kollmann. I thanked him. I want to thank you for listening today. Let me also thank our sponsors today. We had Felix Gray, we had Upstart, and we had Roman, and you heard me talk about all 3 of them. If you'd like more information, you can always find it on the website, harrisfootball.com. You can find a link to all of our current sponsors, and if you have the means and you have the need, and you can use our promo codes and you can use our URLs, well, that's how this little podcast did good. This little business continues on. It's really thanks to all of you, and it's been great, which means you've all been so supportive and so great, and I thank you very much for it. Now, Brett, of course, was flippantly teasing me there at the end about the fact that I have to talk about situations all over again, and in some ways we do. We always are reinventing, but I think this conversation about kind of maybe reinventions of offenses is a little different than getting new personnel. So I thought it was pretty interesting. Brett and I, once we stopped recording, we talked about the Rams for another 25 minutes. The Stafford inclusion in that offense, that's going to be something else, because I think of Matthew Stafford as that Brett Favre wild card, run around, try to make a play, and I don't know how well that will wear in LA, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be a pretty good team. It's going to be a really good division. I don't know. It's a very interesting situation and something that we'll be tracking throughout the summer. All right. Well, so this was the last little bit of business among veterans that we're going to do for a while, because coming up on the next several shows, I think 4 shows in a row, we're just going to do NFL draft talk. I haven't actually booked next week's guest. I have the usual suspects of my draft friends will be along, but it'll be one of them, and we're going to talk about the running backs in this draft class next week, talk about their talent. I watched no college football in 2020, so I'm really going to rely on the guys who have to tell us what's what and what they're capable of before they ever have teams. It's going to be fun. I hope you'll keep listening. Until then, thanks again so much. Could not do this without you. I hope you have a great week. I will talk to you then.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The closing theme is Say Yes by The Wellspring. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode. Say yes. Say yes.